The metro screeched as it pulled into the station, its doors parting to reveal a wave of passengers surging inside. It was a usual rush-hour evening, packed with commuters from every walk of life. Near the doors, a visibly pregnant black woman named Tiana stepped into the cramped train, her hand instinctively cradling her stomach. The discomfort on her face was evident. She was exhausted from a long day of work, and her swollen feet were screaming for relief. Tiana's eyes scanned the seats, hoping for a single open spot, or maybe even someone kind enough to stand up. Yet, she quickly noticed the indifference around her. People sat glued to their phones or stared out the window, some stealing fleeting glances at her before turning away. The air grew heavy with a tense silence, as if everyone was bound by an unspoken agreement to ignore her. A man sitting nearby, dressed in a sharp suit, shifted uncomfortably, clearly aware of Tiana's presence, but he quickly looked away, pretending to be engrossed in his newspaper. A young woman with headphones avoided eye contact altogether, her body angled away from Tiana as though the mere acknowledgement might obligate her to offer her seat. As the train lurched forward, Tiana struggled to maintain her balance, clutching a pole tightly. Her stomach tightened, a subtle pang of discomfort that reminded her how desperately she needed to sit. She took a deep breath, forcing herself to remain calm and composed. But the longer she stood, the more she couldn't shake the feeling of being ostracized, as if her presence was a nuisance. After a few stops, a young white woman with a stroller entered. Within seconds, two people stood up and offered her their seats. Tiana watched in disbelief, feeling a knot of resentment tighten in her chest. Why was it so easy for them to show kindness to someone else, yet act so cold toward her? The injustice of it was blatant, but she forced herself to remain silent, not wanting to draw attention. Yet, as the minutes passed, the strain became unbearable. She swallowed her pride, turning to the suited man who had avoided her gaze earlier. "Excuse me, sir," she began, her voice steady but pleading. "I'm 8 months pregnant. Could I please have your seat?" The man looked at her with a faint sneer, his lips curling slightly. "Should have thought of that before getting on a crowded train," he muttered under his breath, loud enough for her to hear but soft enough to feign innocence. A few nearby passengers overheard and exchanged smirks as though they silently agreed with his dismissive comment. Tiana's face burned with humiliation. She wanted to snap back, to tell him how insensitive and cruel he was being. But her exhaustion and the weight of the moment held her back. She clung to the pole even tighter, her knuckles white, as another wave of pain rippled through her. An elderly man near the back of the train noticed the situation. His face softened, but he too remained seated, hesitant to confront the unspoken social code that seemed to envelop the train. The tension grew thicker with each passing stop, and Tiana's patience wore thin, her breathing shallow and labored. Finally, at the next station, a middle-aged black woman with a commanding presence boarded the train. Her sharp eyes immediately assessed the scene, zeroing in on Tiana standing amid a sea of indifferent faces. She stepped forward, her voice ringing out clearly. "Is anyone here seriously going to let this pregnant woman stand?" she demanded, her gaze cutting through the passengers like a blade. The suited man shifted uncomfortably, his face reddening slightly. Others avoided her gaze, but the woman's unwavering stare demanded a response. Finally, a young man near the back, embarrassed and shamed, rose from his seat. "Please, ma'am," he mumbled, gesturing for Tiana to sit. As Tiana took the seat, she murmured a quiet, "Thank you," grateful yet acutely aware of the uncomfortable silence that now filled the train. But the middle-aged woman wasn't done. She looked around, her eyes fierce. "This isn't just about a seat," she continued, her voice steady and unyielding. "This is about basic decency. Ignoring someone in need just because you can isn't right. It's moments like these that reveal who we truly are." Her words struck a nerve, rippling through the passengers like a jolt. Some looked down, guilt evident on their faces, while others shifted uncomfortably, reluctant to confront the ugliness of their own indifference. Tiana's heart swelled with a mix of gratitude and sadness, realizing that it took a stranger's courage to make others see her humanity. As the train continued its journey, the atmosphere shifted slightly. People seemed more aware of themselves, casting occasional glances in Tiana's direction. When the train reached her stop, the woman who had spoken up helped her up, offering a warm smile. "Take care of yourself, dear," she said softly. Tiana nodded, her voice thick with emotion. "Thank you," she whispered, her eyes glistening. As she stepped off the train, she glanced back at the passengers, hoping they had learned something from the experience. Some seemed humbled, while others returned to their phones, but the impact of that moment lingered in the air. Tiana walked away, her heart heavy but hopeful, silently praying that next time someone wouldn't need to speak up for kindness to be shown. As Tiana walked down the platform, the words of the woman on the train echoed in her mind, giving her strength. Her journey home was filled with reflection on how kindness could be so rare in moments when it was needed most. She resolved to remember this experience, not as a moment of bitterness, but as a reminder of the power of standing up for what's right. Over the next few weeks, life continued as usual, yet Tiana couldn't shake the memory of that evening. She shared her story with friends and family, and word began to spread in her community about the woman who had stood up for her on the train. Inspired, Tiana decided to start a social media page, sharing similar stories of kindness and justice in daily life. She invited others to share moments when someone had spoken up, offering a seat or a helping hand, no matter the circumstances. The page grew faster than she expected. People from all backgrounds shared their experiences, some heartwarming, some painful, but all connected by the theme of compassion and respect. The woman from the train, whom Tiana hadn't seen since that day, even reached out after hearing about the page through a friend. They met for coffee, and as they sat together, Tiana expressed her gratitude, explaining how much that simple act had meant to her. "You know," Tiana said, smiling, "you inspired this whole movement." The woman chuckled, shaking her head. "It was the right thing to do. Sometimes all it takes is one voice, and others will follow. I'm just glad it made a difference." Their conversation was warm, filled with laughter and stories of resilience. As they parted, Tiana felt a renewed sense of purpose, knowing she was no longer alone in facing indifference. In time, Tiana's page became a hub for inspiring change in her city. Stories of people offering seats, lending hands, and standing up for one another multiplied, creating ripples that spread far and wide. People began to recognize her in public, thanking her for reminding them of the importance of kindness. And every time someone offered a seat on the train, she felt a spark of hope. One act of courage had blossomed into a movement, and though the world wasn't perfect, Tiana knew that even small acts could lead to something bigger. For her, it all started on a crowded train, where one person's voice had turned an ordinary moment into a powerful lesson in humanity. And as she continued her journey, Tiana knew she was building a world where empathy was the norm and kindness was never out of reach. If you enjoyed this story and want to see more like it, don't forget to hit the subscribe button and turn on the notification bell so you never miss an update. Your support means a lot, and by subscribing, you'll be the first to know about our latest uploads. Thanks for watching.